As per usual, Shadow and literally everybody else is on a different page. Episode 3 of Eminence and Shadow second season was probably easily one of my favorite episodes of the series so far because it did a really good job of balancing the comedy, which, yes, I've admitted several times is not my favorite, but I actually laughed quite a bit this episode. Some insights into the mechanics of the world itself, and a lot of action. Now, I will obviously claim that not the greatest action out there, but I think this is kind of par for the course for Eminence and Shadows. They do a great job of honestly kind of hiding the fact that they're using a lot of stills. They have a lot of action and presence to their stills that make it seem like there's a lot more going on than there's actually going on. I mean, I think the only thing that kind of really bugs me is that there's a habit of kind of hiding the actual impact of attacks. So you'll have like a sound effect happens and then it cuts to the attack already done. So there's no real kind of showing the attack actually happen. And that kind of bugs me a little bit, but again, I think they did a really fantastic job in this episode, despite the fact that we get a lot of the squiggly line action stuff as well, which is honestly always hard to portray how characters are super fast. They just kind of resort to, well, just show a bunch of squiggly lines all over the screen. That shows how fast they are. In the end, it's still a really fantastic looking episode, a lot of hype, and like I said, they did a good job of kind of just getting me still into the combat, even though this isn't MAPPA or anything like that. But no, obviously for me, the nugget in this episode was honestly a lot of the chemistry and a lot of the reveals that we had in this episode. Opening it up with, yes, Crimson being knocked out, the Shadow Garden showing up. Again, that whole aspect that I get a kick out of, that I still get a kick out of, this idea that Shadow Garden, or at least Beta, is like in a completely different, same page but different book as Shadow is, assuming that, oh, well, obviously there's something going on somewhere else, and he's left this to me. So I gotta make sure I take care of this whole situation, which is, yes, trying to take down Elizabeth. Now, this is where things kind of got crazy for me, and I was really intrigued by this, and honestly, I really was hoping for a little bit more, and a little bit more clarity in what they're kind of explaining here. But yes, Claire gets taken out, and as she's kind of unconscious, we get this little brief scene of Aurora showing back up, which honestly, in the first season, was one of my favorite characters. I think Aurora is fantastic, and I think her chemistry with Shadow is just above really any other character. Yes, like I said, I get a lot of kick out of the idea of characters like Beta, where she believes that Shadow wants her to do something really incredible, but it's an actuality that he just doesn't care, or he just is completely in his own world over here, and she just assumes that he's got some master plan. But I think Aurora and Sid were really fantastic together. Unfortunately, we don't get that here, but we do get it with Aurora and Claire. Now, interestingly, and it kind of gave us hints at this in the first episodes of the season, is this idea that, honestly, it seems like a lot of these advancements in abilities and whatnot seemingly all have an origin that's similar. This idea that the original vampires and the original possessed, they're all the same. It's this evolution of mankind where they were trying to adapt to the world itself. She's explaining it in the idea of evolution, this idea of, monkeys turning into humans at some point, them getting smarter and rising above the rest. And then she's kind of explaining that the same way as both the vampires and the possessed. This is them adapting to the world itself. So it's kind of interesting that she's sort of saying that they're the same thing, but not necessarily the same thing. that's the part where I'm like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more clarity here. My assumption is that, yes, she's implying that this is the same thing. Their origins are the same. It's just it kind of split in some way. And so you do have like this evolution in a different way to vampires, whereas the possessed kind of evolved this way. And yes, technically Sid later on does mention the idea that they're all the same. The ghouls, the possessed, the vampires, they're all the same, and thus they can be basically taken care of the same way. That's why he's able to cure the whole situation with his healing atomic, whatever. Now, I don't know if she's implying the idea that Claire has always been both, but I assume that it's meaning the idea that she is both now. And that's why her body is pretty much breaking right now. And that's why Aurora has to show up. Like, yeah, these two things are inside of you, the possessed and this vampire trait, and they're kind of conflicting inside there. But no, what kind of comes from this is, yes, the fact that she is conflicted inside of herself by these two aspects within her. That's why Aurora has to show up and basically try to calm it down. Which is cool because as she awakens inside of Claire, she's basically she's like the mama. I just love that whole segment. Like, again, this is why I kind of really like Aurora. Is like she just shows up and she's like, oh yeah, let me take care of this whole situation. Oh, you young ones, you're so energetic. That's a good thing. It's like, this is literally Elizabeth, who's like this queen of vampires, and she's really, really old, but that yet you have Aurora that's kind of like, oh, you youngster, let me show you how it's done. Obviously, still having to limit her, which is kind of it is sort of a bummer because you kind of want to see Aurora at her full potential, but this is obviously the easiest way to sort of keep her under wraps. Like, we don't want to get her too crazy, so let's just have her have these limits within Claire that she can't use her full power. And even, yes, seemingly seems like she was going to do the I am atomic thing that Shadow has done in front of her, which was a little bit different. It was something like, I am the all something, I am the almighty something, but yeah, she couldn't do it because Claire's body can't control her. He can't withstand her great power. But it was really cute. When she first shows up, she's like, oh yeah, I'm just using light to change things. And it's just like what you guys do. Oh yeah, oh gosh, wait, hold on a second. Super tight. It's like a quick jab at Claire in her chest size. I thought it was fantastic. And again, this kind of adds into that whole element when she's talking to Beta. And the idea that she keeps saying, you can do this too. Oh, you could do this too. Oh, Elizabeth, chill. What do you think you're doing? I am the original. It, again, kind of puts that emphasis on the idea that she's technically a generation before Elizabeth. This idea of like, everything is sort of from me. Like, I am the original, and I thus can pretty much control everything if it weren't for the fact that, again, Claire's body can't control her powers. But again, she keeps noting to Beta, you could do this too. Oh, I'm doing the same thing you do. Oh, I broke my hand. Oh, I'll just heal it. You guys do this too, don't you? She keeps pointing out this idea of like, I am the same as you. Stop acting like I'm doing something special. You can do this too. Which is kind of interesting. It does kind of show that idea of the growth that everybody in Shadow Garden can do. Plus, additionally, technically, everybody else. Anybody else that has been possessed, anybody else of this bloodline can do the same thing. This is nothing special to Aurora, just the idea that she's an earlier bloodline, so she knows how to control it better. And yeah, it's just kind of seeing Aurora just being awesome was really great. I love Aurora. Like I said, I like her chemistry most of all with Shadow, but I did like the fact that unlike most situations where it's just kind of handled by Sid, I always get excited whenever there's another character that kind of shows, like flexes their muscles. And again, it kind of plays into the potential of Claire going forward. Again, having these two bloodlines, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing because it's it's a split evolution that technically originates somewhere else. And so there is kind of a divide happening. But again, it could be kind of playing off of the benefits of both. She could essentially have both of these powers for herself. It really does paint this big picture that Claire could be really massively OP in the future, possibly, if she can learn to control it. Even though Sid, being as tunnel vision as he is, has no clue that she has this potential now. He thinks that she's a Chuny. That was kind of the annoying thing that kind of happens. It's like, he shows up, he has no clue what's happening around him. He's just like, oh, well, here's where the boss was. I thought the boss was somewhere else, and I came back, and sure enough, the boss was right here. He blasts everything with this super Healy spell, which is Yawn, and then afterward just leaves. He just came there, went to protect his money, fix the situation, and then leaves and has no clue what happened around him. Like, he doesn't take in what happens to Elizabeth afterwards. He doesn't take into what happens that even Claire's even there and that she was mortally wounded. He doesn't care about any of that. I don't even think in the after shot where he's literally watching Claire and she's got this whole like bandage and everything, and he's again claiming that she's going through that phase. He's pretty much seeing himself in her. Like, oh, well, yeah, a lot of kids go through this. She's going through this phase now. I'll support her. If I push back, then that'll make her rebellious. I need to make sure that I support her. Again, having no clue what happened up there, now she's got these two bloodlines in her and everything, and that she almost lost control, and that Aurora had to step in and help him out. It is kind of curious. Which does bring up a good point. I'm curious how Aurora is actually functioning. I knew that Sid pretty much like saved her in a way, but she technically died, I thought. But this kind of implies the idea that either she's like a spirit that's wandering around, or she's with Shadow the whole time, and that she's able to leap into somebody, or at some point she was placed inside of Claire. Or it could be this idea that because Claire has this original bloodline in Aurora, maybe all people that are possessed have a part of Aurora in them, and she just awoke inside of Claire in order to protect her because Claire is Shadow's. Again, this kind of goes in that whole thing where I wish there was a little bit more clarity as to how things happen. But the interesting thing that happens when Shadow shows up and he does his all-powerful boom boom, is the idea that it sort of implies that there is an effect that happens to Beta. They're asking how Claire's doing, and then Beta says something to the effect of, okay, so she's fine. Myself, not so much. Eta is going to have a field day with this. And her hand disappears. I don't remember them ever implying that Beta did not have a hand. Which would, I mean, what this is sort of showing me right here is that Beta has never had a hand. And that she has, similar to like Epsilon, who's using her slime, whatever, her aura to kind of create her chest. It kind of implies this idea Beta has been doing the same with her hand. Which is kind of tragic if you think about it, because, again, Beta always loves to write things. And this kind of implies that the only reason she's able to write what she wants, able to write these fan fictions and stuff like that, able to be Natsumi, is because she's using the power that Sid had bestowed upon her. Which adds a little bit more character to Beta and the idea of how much she would love Sid because she's able to write the stories that she wants to write. Or the idea that because he gave me this hand, I will repay him by creating these stories. It's kind of cool. I'll be curious to see what kind of comes from that. If this is idea that because he cured this stuff, it kind of made it dissipate, like the power that they had over it. Or maybe it just kind of, because it settled everything down, their power itself dropped a little bit. Like he pushed the possession back, like lowered its power. Because like you said, it's pretty much a magic overload. And so as they get more power, that magic overload gets too much and then overtakes them. So by him sort of suppressing it, of course, if they do create something to be a prosthetic or whatever, it's going to go away. So I'll be curious what comes from that because, again, she mentioned the idea that Eta is going to have a field day with this. So it kind of plays in that whole idea of, is this more information to give them more knowledge about the possession, or is it simply her talking about the two different genetic evolutions? But yeah, the fight overall was really awesome. Elizabeth was way amazing. I love that whole aspect of her just kind of basically just harming people to shed blood, and that makes her more powerful. So it's almost like this unending supply of power, which again, technically Aurora sort of shows is you all can do this, which is again another one of those interesting aspects. But it was really cool. Again, I liked the fight between Aurora and Elizabeth, even, you know, bringing everybody else in, the Kitsune and everybody, which didn't really add much to the scene besides have them see how powerful Shadow Garden is and how powerful Shadow is. But it was cool nonetheless. And then, of course, we wrap up the episode with the Kitsune apparently meeting with Shadow. I'm curious how that played out. If the scene at the end of the episode was, or the after credit, was before Sid left with Claire, because he does imply this idea that, well, I lost a lot of that money, but I can come back here. This is basically my piggy bank. Is he saying that because he had a meeting with this Kitsune and she said something to the effect of producing money, or if he's just implying the idea that there's a lot of money in this lawless city and I'll just come back and get some more later on? I'll be curious to see what comes from that. I'm assuming that meeting is going to be something to do with the next arc, but cool episode overall. Really, really enjoyed it. A lot of great little insights, and like I said, I'm probably drawing some really dumb conclusions, but that's how it is here. I like driving the sources nuts. But yeah, that's my thoughts on episode 3 of season 2 of Eminence and Shadow. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below, comment, let me know if you thought of the episode. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more and you like this content, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate everybody it does, and y'all take care.